Good afternoon. Welcome to our session today on the Operations Mobile Client. My name is Adrian North, and with me today is Miriam. We're going to be running through the new Operations Mobile application that we've developed for the Dynamics 365 for Operations system. In today's session, we're going to go through some examples of our application and some of the capabilities that we have kind of focused from an end user, so you can get an understanding of the kind of value that users in the organization can get from the application and how they can accomplish things on the go, giving them more freedom than they have with the application today. We're going to go through and we'll talk about how to set up existing mobile workspaces, ones that we're shipping as functional capabilities within the product, as well as those that might come from an ISV or a partner or that a customer themselves might create and deploy, as well as go through the design process. The steps you go through to build these mobile experiences and helping you to mobilize parts of the business so that users can get access on the go. With the AX7, when we released that about a year ago and now named Dynamics 365 for Operations, we spent a lot of time focusing on how we take forward the AX 2012 forms and UI capability. There's a lot of business assets that are part of that. And we put a lot of time into building a very rich, responsive, browser-based client. But because of our goals of being able to reuse the assets that we had, the forms, we really ended up with a system that was, although responsive and works on a variety of devices, different sizes, it requires a connection in terms of what you're doing. We had thought about how we could take those experiences that we had on the desktop that got migrated to the web. Can they make it onto the phone as they are? And through our experimentation on that and investigations, we really weren't happy with the capabilities that we had. What we ended up realizing is we needed to have a new platform that we use to build those mobile experiences, because there's some key differences between the browser client and the world it's operating in, which focuses a lot on both casual as well as heads down users and productivity. We need to get something that hits a few principles. One of the ones we were looking at is needed to be offline. That was an important aspect that the current browser client just doesn't have because of its nature of the applications that we're carrying over. The second, it had to have a great mobile experience. The browser client, can, be used on a phone. It's not an optimal experience. It wasn't designed for that. It was designed for, larger screen form factors. And the responsive work we did allowed those to shrink down to mid-sized tablets. And it can be used on a phone with those same rules going down, but it's not a great experience. With this new mobile app, we wanted to focus on making a great mobile experience. And continuing the same thread that we had with the browser client, where we moved the forms over, we wanted to continue reusing the assets that we have. So how we went about that is with the offline first. We introduced a new caching mechanism for our mobile app so that all of the data you use, whether you're online or offline, is always cached onto the device. That gives us fast access. So even anything you're doing, you're going to be working against local data. And then whenever it's necessary in the background, we're going to synchronize to the cloud to keep things in sync. We're going to defer that form logic. A lot of the logic that we have in the system is based on the forms that we have that are up on the server, and those are expensive calls. And that's where we're going to defer that stuff as late as possible. And we ended up with a very lightweight client because of the interaction model against the local cache. With the mobile first, we had to introduce a number of new patterns that we have within there in terms of the mobilizing. It no longer is the simple list in details and the separate list page and the details pages and the drill downs. We followed a number of more modern mobile patterns in terms of page by page, getting to a rich workspace of information, drilling into lists of things that are just a stacked list. You clicking on those, you go to another page to get the details. Navigations to actions. We kind of broke those down into some mobile patterns. We introduced a lot of touch-friendly gestures in here, and you'll see this in the demo coming up in a little bit. We focused on things like swipe gestures and for refreshing, for getting to additional actions. Everything is touch-enabled on there, and we continue to invest in those things to kind of bring more capabilities into this application. We've currently shipped this in November. And we've been doing monthly updates to the platform, continuing to add new features. So this is an area where we're just getting some momentum on it. We're interested in feedback and learning as to the kinds of things we're doing and the scenarios that you have that you could build on here. We support iOS and Android today. They're available in the App Store. You can download the mobile client and connect to an existing system that's Platform Update 3 or newer. And we're working on the Windows Mobile. That one should be coming out shortly and available in the store. Along the topic of the reusing assets, there's a lot of functionality that's baked into the forms in the product. That's where a lot of the business logic ends up. And so we end up using those forms as part of the process. Essentially think of it as a headless version of the form that the mobile client is playing against. So we do our actions offline, separate from that, and then we'll play that back in terms of, so that aligns us to the security model, to the business functionality, to the licensing. Everything that you're doing in this mobile client, is aligned to what you would have from the browser client, but it's done differently in terms of offline and mobile patterns. So with that, I want to turn it over to Miriam to run through. Okay, well,
we can go through the offline scenarios, and then when you fix this, we can come back.
Do you want to work on that, and I'll just go ahead to some other slides and come back? Okay, so we have a demo glitch. One of the servers we're connecting to wasn't up right now. So what I can do is highlight a few of the capabilities while she's getting that up and running. The page flow that we have in terms of the application, you start off in a dashboard, and you'll see a little bit more of this in action a little bit when we get to the demo, where you start in the part that's a little higher that talks about the application dashboard. And we have a number, think of this as a mobile client that has a suite of areas. Every one of the items you see on here represents what we call a mobile workspace. It's a mobilized set of functionality that's related to a particular set of tasks that somebody would do. It's the unit at which both developers work and then the users start in terms of their navigation. From there, you can drill into a given workspace, and some of the basic workspace just gives you a set of lists. What are the key areas that I can navigate into? If I was in an example like dealing with sales, I might see a list of sales orders. I might see a list of pending orders in a particular status. I could see a list of customers or a set that's filtered down to some functional area. Those are kinds of things you would see at that first level. As you drill in, you get into the list items in there, and we have a basic card that you'll see here, and Miriam will have a much richer visual card that we have coming up in the March release. We're going to be adding in some capabilities that really increase the UI experience. From the list, you drill into details. You can see additional information. Header and line is one of the patterns we're supporting in there. And then you can go into actions. In terms of the sequence that you're going through, when you go through the list and the details, you're really dealing with read-only data at that point. We are architected that way to allow ourselves to pull down data very specifically and get it cached onto the device. And when you're taking action to make changes, you go into a separate page where it's very targeted at the type of things you're doing. So we're gathering just the specific fields that you're changing so that we can send those to the server asynchronously, process them. If they submit in, great. If not, we get an error message coming back to the user to deal with. And all of that is the cache in the middle that's taking care of that experience. Off to the far side of the screen, we also have an application menu that contains things for signing in and out. What's the company and the URL? What's the current user logged in about? Those kind of things. We'll be adding more app functionality over that whole shell as we go along. Are you ready yet, or I'll keep going? Okay. You ready?
No.
Okay. Okay. Mobile architecture. I'll talk a little bit about the architecture behind the application. And so the first time the application comes up, you're not connected to anything. So the application by itself that you get from the store doesn't provide any capability. It's really a shell to pull down information from a given instance. So we take a URL. That's the same URL you go to the browser client with. You put that into there, and then that's your login process. On that first login, we connect to that system and say, for you as a user, first, are you authorized? Using standard Active Directory credentials. Then what we do is we fetch the mobile workspaces that are available for the user, and we send those down. That list of mobile workspaces I mentioned earlier, that's kind of the unit of the application. We'll take down that workspace and all of the related lists, details, and action forms that are all part of that, pull those down to the client as the metadata. Now, as you go in and navigate through the product, you still haven't hit any data yet. The first time you open your forms, we now start pulling down the fields that you have on the list. And we pull down just the fields that are on that list. So it's very slim in terms of the amount of data that you're pulling down to kind of optimize from a caching perspective and for performance. As you drill into a detail page, we're now going to go fetch the information that we don't have there. But we're reusing the information that's been cached earlier, so we're just getting what other fields we don't have from the prior experience. And so we optimize what the user's ending up seeing on the process coming down in the cache. We also are putting in features that allow you to pre-cache. So up in the workspace level, when you're pulling down that metadata, is the user identified as somebody that should have certain types of data pulled down in terms of records. Maybe there's a set of sales orders or a partial list of customers that you want to have that are locally available for the one on the system. Now that you've gotten that base information and reference data, I should have mentioned reference data is also pulled down in this process as well. We now can go in and go offline. And the user can be in airplane mode. They can be in a remote part of the warehouse where you just don't get any networking access and you take some functions. You're on the train wanting to do an expense report, scenarios that you don't have the connectivity. At that point in the process, you can be offline. You can see records that have been pulled down either through a pre-caching or through your own interaction. You can now start doing updates. You can create new records. You can delete records. And when you come back online, we will then detect that and start synchronizing and sending each one of the changes that you've done to the server. So there's a queue of tasks that are available. And then as you have that connectivity, we'll work our way through. If you have any cases that require additional input, we're going to prompt the user for that, and then they can continue on with the caching. And sometimes that'll happen. Users doing data entry will type in a value that the client side didn't do the validation for you. It was more complicated. It needed other data. And so that happens up on the server tier, and then the user gets that opportunity to make a correction. So with that, I'm going to go back to Miriam and have her do a demo of the client.
Okay. So hello everyone.
Mike.
I'm Miriam.
I think your mic's on. There you go.
So let's start. What we are going to do first is that I'm going to actually give you.
Can you hear?
Still not working.
Where's it clipped? Oh, it's too low. You're going to have to clip it up higher.
Is it better?
Yeah, you have to clip it up about right here. A little higher, yeah.
Is it better? Can you hear me?
Higher. You want to go there.
Okay, let's go much higher. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Okay. So let's first walk through the app experience. So we have this fleet management is one of the car rental. Essentially, it's just a car rental app, and we're using it as a sample app every time we add a functionality or add an API. We try to incorporate those to our sample app. It's available throughout GitHub, and we'll go through it, and I'll show it to you as well, beside all the APIs that are available to you. So with that, let's start. So here, these are my workspaces. The first one is the one that we're going to go through, and we're going to go through a scenario that I can show you some of the offline capability, and also the rich UX that we added. So if I go to my workspace, you can see there are some information that captured here at a glance for the user. You can see on the top the counted tiles. They're essentially navigation to 3 other lists, and also a count of the records that are available. And then you can see here we have another inline list, which is essentially just showing the active reservation and the designer of the app deciding that this is probably the page that the user will end up starting his work with when he comes and visit the app. One thing that I want to point out in this list, you can see this is a card style, and with our rich UX design, you have the capability to make a lot of it just gives you a lot of flexibility, as you can see. You can pick the fields that you want from the detail page. You can show pictures. You can align them any way you want. And also, you have access to the font. You have access to the color. For example, you see that the status in the top, in the bottom right corner, showing as new. These are the status of the reservation. And also beside that, you can see that there is a link at charge that can take you to take an action on that item, even though you're just seeing it from the list itself. Let's just quickly have a look at a detail of one of this as well. So again, another rich UX design of the detail page, and you can see the actions. There are 4 actions that we are showing with those circle button on the middle of the page, and then you can see there is another action that we are showing as a type of link, just to show all the different ways that are available. But this is essentially a JSON object that is available to you. You can align the elements in the page, you can give them a style, and that gives a lot of flexibility. So let's walk through a scenario that we have. Assuming that we have a customer, his name is Tony. He wants to make a reservation. Let's say that he calls, and then he makes a reservation. So the user comes here, start an action or task. This is a lookup, and this is pointing you to the same all customer page that you saw. So lookups, essentially, you can create this list. You can show them as a list. You can use them as a lookup. And when you're using them as a lookup, you're having this flexibility of picking which fields to show up as that particular lookup. So here, we are showing the picture, we are showing name, and we are showing the driver license. Let's pick Tony. And then the same thing, another lookup for vehicles, and you can see the status of the lookup, also a status of the cars showing as rented, available. Let's go pick something for Tony. Maybe this red available car. And then you can see that this pickup, it's something that through the business logic, you can set a default value, which is defaulted to today for now. Let's put return. Again, the other capability that we have based on the control type, we recognize that control type, and we are launching the right device keypad for the user. And let's go done and create it. You can see that message on the top of the page alerting user that these changes are being synced to the server. So now we're going to the AX, and that takes a little while, but you come back to the main page. You can see this sync item, because even though that data was synced, now that data just being added to the list, and that goes away. So, not this way though. I think your computer is locked. Back up your projector with.
Yeah, it's on screen, just.
Something with projector. Yes, and we're back on. Okay, so now let's go through the offline scenarios. Now the customer wants to come and pick up the car. The agent might be in the garage or something and doesn't have access to internet. So let's go and set it up to airplane mode. Okay, we are offline now. Now the customer comes in. Maybe the best way to find the reservation for the customer is to go alt customer page. You have a list of customer. You can just search for Tony. And as you can see, the list is being filtered down, so you can find Tony very easy. And then this is Tony details. One thing that is good, you can see that there is a link here, essentially going to all the rentals with the filter of Tony. So if you click on that, you can see all the rentals that Tony had in previously or currently are showing up here. But before we go to the rental, maybe we want to update some of the customer information. So this is for data entry. Let's say we can change his email address. Just figured out that he had a live account that might work better. Maybe his driver license. Let's just verify that information. Done. So you can see, because we're offline, in the top corner, you can see one sync operation being queued up. So all of this action that the user is taking, we're just going to queue those operations as task, one sync operation. But it has to be completely seamless to the user. User still continues to do their things. And when they go online, this sync operations are going to kick off, and they're just going to be processed. So to make it interesting, let's also update Tony's picture. So you can see that number increasing to 2, just alerting user that there are 2 sync operations to be done. What can we do next? Let's just go to the rental. This 2017 is his current rental. We see all the details here. And you can see, this is one thing that I want to point out. Even though we updated the Tony's picture, so we are normalizing the cache data. And every cache piece of data is only stored in one place. Even though you're updating the customer detail, all the reservations that are pointing to that customer, even though you're offline, are going to be updated to show you the most updated picture. So the experience should be very seamless and smooth for the user online or offline. And another link that we configured that can get you to the details from here too. So let's just take a final action. Just starting the reservation, putting the mileage, 3 operation, we're good to go. He's off. And our agent goes back online. So as we go back online, those operations are going to start processing. And you can see that number is going down. It was 3, 2. And this is, again, user goes and does his thing as it used to do. It doesn't have to do anything unless there is an error, which is going to show up as an error, and the user has to go and correct it. Other than that, that number should go down, and it just be sync up. And our AX server, all good. So the user goes back and start the work. And these are the back buttons that we are actually doing. All the stacks are going to be. As they're visiting the page, we're just stacking them up, so back also works very well. So now just the user goes ahead and do the business as usual. Yes?
Does the user have to keep an active connection in order to stay alive?
No. You saw that we come. You close the app, we have those synced up. Then when you open it again, we're going to start the queue. So the next piece of work that we're going to do is that we're going to show that count as a badge on the app itself, that there are 3 pending tasks. But essentially, you have to be in the app to start. There's no background work. But as long as you're in the app, you don't have to do anything. We're going to pick up the queue item and start processing them. But in case you close them, the next time you visit, we're going to start that process again.
So just the question was around, do you have to be in the app to do the synchronization? Okay. One other question?
How do you take care that you have multiple processes who are working on the same thing, which are in sync? The first, this one is done, that one is done, that one is done?
Sure.
Because I'm pushing something through the warehouse.
Absolutely. So these are for 2 cases. There are 2 users that are doing the update to the same case. That's what you mean. So it's very similar to web client, but we are not keeping the session open, and every time we are sending a request. So the next time that we're sending a request, if that data updated by someone else, if we are still updating it and we're not causing any error, we're going to be overriding it. But if because of the data that has changed, then we can actually cause some errors because some data, the state of the data changed. Then the error will show up in there, and the user has to go and correct them.
So for new record creation, you shouldn't have any problem because we're doing sequence numbers. It's just when the same record is being updated by multiple users, then you could get into things. We're not using the same optimistic concurrency as they do in the client, which would give you an error, and then the second user has to start over. This is expected to be more, disseparate, so the last one wins in this model. Okay. Was that all for the demo then?
This is for the demo. Do I
Okay.
have to go to the
I think
other
you
part?
might be up next again on the demo for the other part. Nope, there's a few slides I'll go through.
Sure.
So the next thing I wanted to share was, that gives you an experience of going through the client, and you can see a very rich mobile experience that we have, the offline capabilities you saw within there, the forms that you saw us go through. We're using backing forms on the AX and the browser client. They're running headless. That's where all the synchronization tasks, both the query and the actions that were sent. That's how we're sending things through. So it's important to understand that key part as you go into the building. Not important for users, but more for developers who are making them. Microsoft right now is working on a number of mobile workspaces that have shipped and that will be shipping in the future, and we're working to do these in a faster cadence, where our normal release cycle for the application suite is every 6 months update. We're on a monthly cadence, where the platform as well as applications are being revised and sent out. So you'll start to see a list of these over the coming months through. So far, we've released 5 mobile workspaces since the mobile platform became available in November. We have cost controlling, providing some visibility into the cost process. Inventory on hand allows people to take a look at information in terms of what we have available in the system. Sales orders allows viewing, sales orders and status as well as customers. Vendor collaboration allows a vendor to take a look at purchase orders that have actions. Project time entry allows, entering billable and non-billable time for a particular project. Those are the ones that we've gotten done so far. We have a number that were in progress in HR and in the expense area, and I got a mistake on here. It should be PO approvals is the one that's in development coming up, similar to the invoice approvals. And so this is an area that we're continuing to invest in. So if there's some feedback that you have, not that I can answer questions on these, but what are the areas of the product that you're interested from the core that you may want to see to mobilize? Our application teams are interested in that feedback to help us guide our process. Now, in terms of building workspaces, there's kind of a development process that you have to go through. One of the key things we have, because we've talked about using the server forms as the backing set of information, business logic, security, it's important that we're using mobile-friendly forms. Not all of the forms in AX work with the new restraints that we have in terms of the ability to run headless, that allows us to do our synchronization in terms of the actions and fetching the data down. So many forms are mobile-friendly, but not all of them. In those cases where they're not, either could be a change to the form if it's one you own, or you may end up having to create a separate mobile form that the users in the browser client doesn't use, but it allows you to share some of the business logic between those forms that are then a simpler version that meets the requirements. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the caveats that exist in the mobile forms. The second part is around recording the mobile pages and actions. And so you'll go through and you'll see in the demo how we go through and use the browser client to identify the form that you're on, the fields, and record actions that we then use for the playback process. The next one is an optional step around adding client-side logic and UI customization. When you first build the experience, you get a very vanilla, functional experience, similar to the slides I had shown at the beginning, and I think Miriam will be able to show some examples of those base ones. But then you can go in and apply client-side logic and customization. The customization provides that rich user experience, allows you to put the count tiles on a workspace, moves actions into a specific spot, build really rich card lists within there. And the client logic is important because when you can defer it all to the server form, but then that means that the users don't get the prompting up front if they make a mistake, and especially if they're offline. You'll get the message when we synchronize to the server and then we send back the message. So sometimes you can move certain types of functionality up to the client so it happens up closer to the user's data entry. Once you're through doing that process, it's now ready to start packaging it up for the shipping. We recommend using deployable packages as the mechanism to take any form changes that you have, as well as the definition of the mobile workspace. You can take that deployable package, move that to a test environment, so you can start having users in an organization run through some common scenarios that they need to collect some feedback. And then when all that's done, it's able to publish that package to LCS for use in your organization or for others. Now, on the topic of the mobile-friendly forms, there's a few patterns that we've discovered as we were going through the building of this, and it's kind of been it's a growing list. That isn't to say that there aren't any other areas or pitfalls that could come up. As we find them, we'll end up sharing those out as well. But one of the things we do is we open the form from the browser in a headless way to execute against that. So we need that form to be openable without context. There's a lot of forms in the product that require a record that for you to do the work in that came from another form. So it's a tight coupling that exists in the logic today. We need that to be openable without, and then some of that context will be available from the browser or from the mobile app to pass as, say, a filter. Or the concept of switching views. Some of the rich forms where we really were pushing the envelope in terms of the capabilities to provide the browser client with a richer experience. They do a lot of more dynamic capabilities in there. And then that ends up getting in the way of the mobile form because it needs a very repeatable process to be able to do its recording. Interactions like hiding and showing and adding controls. Again, because of the dynamic nature, the mobile client doesn't get the same set of experience for the playback each time. Data sources as a view, those present a challenge. A lot of the query-based ones, which is the majority in the system, they work just fine. Hierarchical controls, because that's all programmatically added, it's all dynamic. And extensible controls. We're working with the primitive types in the system. You get most of the capabilities you need through that, and there's just a few extensible controls that we're looking at. How do we take care of in the future? So if you have one of those forms that's mobile friendly, then you don't have to worry about it. You can record based on the core form itself and use that. In those few cases when you can't do it, you end up having to create a simplified version of the form, try and share some of your logic between, and then you just package up those mobile forms, those mobilized forms with the solution that you want to send out. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Miriam to run through a demo.
Bring up my remote desktop. Okay, so let's just build one very simple app together so that we can see. Just to make sure that I can switch between these two easily. Yep. Going back to our workspaces. First, let us just create one together, and then we can walk through some of the UX design as well. So I'm not sure how many of you have seen, essentially, if you want to create an app, if this is your iOS instance, you just need to put the flag mobile mode equals to mobile to be able to have access to the side pane. To create an app, there are many options. You can import, essentially any of these things can be exported and can import it to another machine if you have all the forms behind it available. So let's just go ahead and create something together. And you can see you have available colors that you can set for the theme. You can set an icon. Now you want to add a page. So you start by saying, this is just to use some of the example we already had. We want an add reservation. You can add more description to your page. For the sake of the demo, we can make it faster and not go through that. So you're just opening up your form. I apologize, I'm not very used to this mouse, and it might be a little slow. So you're selecting field. This is essentially recording everything that you want to include in your list. This is going to show up as a list page. When you do the select field, everything that you are selectable has this plus that is very easy for the user to know which fields they can select. Let's just go ahead and select most of these things: pickup, return, status, customer, and vehicle. So there it goes, our list. Now let's go ahead and add a detail page as well. Reservation detail. So you can select the fields. Go to reservation details. You can select your ID, you can select your customer, you can select vehicle description, photo, VIN, more information, mileage, and I think we're good for now. So how are you going to link that page to this one? As you can see, you have these two pages available. You try to go from the list to detail. So this property is available to you. This is somewhere that you can set a very simple style as card or symbol, simple or card, which we're going to go with card. Let's see why didn't that show up. I'm going to fill a store. Let's go back. All list, edit, quit. So this list, this detail page, essentially it should show up. How we're recognizing that is based on the data source. And I recorded one page for the all reservation and one page for reservation detail. But it seems that something that I did was not right. So let's quickly try to fix this together. And hope this will work. Yeah, so this is how it happens. The list had all reservation as a master data source, main data source behind it. Detail page also had that. So based on that, we are recognizing that this detail can be actually from the list. You can link to this detail page. And that's how we are pre-populating the list, the detail page that can be selected for that list page. Done. Save. So let's go to our mobile app. We are refreshing the workspace. Sorry, we are having a bunch of issues, and one thing that I saw is that it was asking me to replace the existing workspace, even though it was a new one, so I might have edited something as I was clicking around. Let's see. Oh, No, that's not the case. So the reason is that it is not being published. So whenever the user actually creates these workspaces, when they want to actually publish them, if it is in development or if it is something that was applied through hotfixes, after that they can actually publish it to the user. And until they click on this publish, it's not going to be published. So now let's go back and we should be able to see it. Yep, there it is. And we have the to-list page, detail page. And we have the color that we picked. We have the card style that we picked. We have the fields that we picked. And because we already linked them to the detail page, from one of them you can go to the detail page and see the detail page information. So when you had the form, aside from some of the technical problems, when you had the form available, within like 5 minutes you could create an app from scratch. Without even UX, you will get some default format for it that can be useful right away. So the second thing that I'm going to show you is that you have this one that we created together, but to add some more UX stuff, we need a little bit more pages. So this is something else that we have. It doesn't have that rich UX that I showed you in the first demo. It has this list and detail page. That is the pattern that we usually have. And based on this very simple pattern, we can build very, with rich UX, we can build also very powerful app. So for this one, this is the extended business logic that Adrian was talking about. And it starts with 3 simple functions that you can provide. One of them is app init. Essentially, you're saying, run this code before you initialize my workspace. The other one is page init, saying that every time the user is visiting that page, run this piece of code. And then you have access to the metadata so that you can see which page you are going to and run a certain piece of logic for that page. Very similar thing for task. The part that is about the design part is just 2 lines that I commented out for that page that you just saw. This line is allowing you to pass a design object for the detail page, and that's how you are able to get to that rich design. And if you can see this, this is just a JSON object that you're putting all of your element there and giving it a styling. And all of our APIs for this are available on GitHub. When my page loads. So the other things that you can do through this business logic is doing validation for your field. For example, if it is a phone number, there should be some validation on that I can show. So just to show you, this is our GitHub. To get our sample code, you can come here, you can download the code. If you go to the Wiki tab, you have access to all of our APIs that you can use in business logic, documented here for you. So the last thing we can just do, sorry? It is also in the,
Oops, sorry.
So this is the GitHub, but we have it on the deck that is available for the demo deck. Adrian will actually have it on that slide, and he will go through it, and you can get this link from the demo deck.
Sorry about the feedback. I was just coming to say I'll have this in the deck. It's when one of the slides coming up, we have links to the wiki and some of the other material that we have available for you to look at.
So just one last thing, that those design object that you saw, let's just comment that line, so that design object will be applied to both workspace. We have one design object for the workspace, and we have one design object for the detail page. And this one is what you saw in my first demo. But what we're going to do is to save this business logic. And quickly I show you that this is the app right now that doesn't have that extensive UX added to it, and we're just going to download, we're going to upload this new file that had those 2 lines only. And you can see the result right away. Done. Save. Oh, let's go to our app. No. So once it is published, after that, all the changes you are making to is going to be available right away. The only thing is that if you are using this XML of the app, if you're using it as a resource to AOT, then those are not changeable. You cannot change them. But if you import them, then you can actually change them. Let's just refresh.
So is there a way that you can take the app, like, would you duplicate your app to then modify one that you wouldn't want to publish if users are using the
Just be
app
careful.
and wanting to-
One of the reasons, if you do duplicate, you can export the app and import it again. That's one of the things. If you export it, we're going to create that XML for you, right? The only thing is that when you're importing that, there is a GUID that is, each app is identified with GUID. If you use the same XML, then that GUID is going to be overriding the existing app. So you kind of have to change that.
But what you're bringing up is an important scenario. When Microsoft ships one of these mobile apps for, say, cost controlling, and you have a customization on your system and need to add in a field into what we've done, you can take the experience, duplicate that, change that ID, and then go through and add in the additional field in your recording, as well as if we had a rich visual experience, placing that and doing some of the flex layout to get there. So that is something we're going to end up needing to document as a scenario to go through as far as, applying customizations that you might have to your environment to something that somebody else shipped in terms of the mobile experience. But what Miriam had talked about, that it would normally be inside of one of our AOT resources as the shipping mechanism. Then it's not as easily updatable. You can still export it, make changes under a different name to go in, and then you just wouldn't publish the original version. You'd publish your new version.
So as you saw, that the next time that we went in, just applying those design objects that is documented for you, and I really recommend you look at the documentation, you look at one of our sample, just applying those design to workspace and then to the detail page here will change the UX completely from the list, the default view to this view. So that's all I have, but I'm very happy, aside from all the technical glitches, we were able to show anything. And if you have any question, I will be happy to take it at the end.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for running through that. It shows a number of things that we talked about in the beginning, the process around, recording from your application, how you're using an existing form. You're making references to specific fields on the form or columns within a list to be the items that go into your recording process. These are some recapping some of the things we'd seen. In terms of the client-side logic, there's a number of scenarios that we support that are beneficial. Restricting values. There may be certain things you don't want a user to do from the mobile experience conditionally based on the status of an enum, the value of something, where normally you'd put that business logic in X++ as part of a validate method on the form. Here, you don't have access to that up front, so you can put that inside of your logic. Hiding fields, orchestrating or doing calculated field values, all of those are options that you can do inside of the JavaScript. And it goes back to the 3 methods that Miriam brought up. We have an application init event where you can capture and do certain types of scenarios there. On the page load in terms of the information that's coming in. And then on the task, when you're doing an action within the system, that point that you can add particular logic in. And at the bottom of these couple of pages are links to the GitHub where you can find specific information relative to this type of APIs. Here's another example that we had in one of the business functions inside one of the samples we had done, where we have an event that we're registering based on reservation details. We want to take a look at one of the enums on there. So we grab data from our cache and pull in that field, and then we do some conditional checks based on state, and then we'll hide and show various UI based on it. So it gives you an example of the kinds of code that you would write in JavaScript to be able to do the client-side experience. In terms of the customization, one of our prototypes we were working on internally for an expense application is to show a richer card. Miriam showed 2 different styles of, well, actually 3. A basic one where you just did the recording, no custom UI, and it showed up as a very simple card. There was one in the first demo that you had ran through, and then the second one where she was loading in the JavaScript on that. That one had a 3rd style of card. This is just another one that we were doing in terms of the very flexible layout. We're using Flexbox-like properties and CSS-like properties within a JSON object. That's how you go in and define the information. And here's an example that's going through and specifying, what area you're working on, what's the object or the entity we're on. The flex flow tells us the type of layout that we want. Within the nested elements, we're providing information on background and label styling, border information. As you go into each of the items, you can apply CSS-like styling on there that affects the font size. So there's a lot of flexibility that we have. We've started with a relatively small syntax, but it's very expressive in the types of changes that we can do. Again, this is an area that we're open for feedback. What are the kinds of things that, as you're building APIs, that you're missing some capability that exists in CSS today? Since this is a CSS or a web-based application, we're relying on then translating these into the specific underlying technologies. And here's a link to the 2 places. We have a mobile development handbook, and then the wiki, which also includes the samples for the APIs. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the first one, since Miriam has showed you the second one already. We have, as the mobile platform, Getting Started, and it talks about how the navigation, the development, architecture, page information within the product. And it goes through things like the fleet example that she had shown, how to access that and take a look at it. These things are more focused on the developers and providing a overall view of where you're at. And this is an area we're continuing to invest in, is documentation on this new area to help more people uptake. Okay. Now, what? I should get a picture of the 50 cameras that just shot up on that last one. Yes, I am. Right after this, I'll send them up. Yep. We were making changes right up till the moment coming in, so. Deploying mobile workspaces, I want to talk a little bit about the process for that. With operations, there's a number of deployment options that we have. Microsoft, when we're making changes that include overlayering and our normal processes to use hotfixes, which are then downloaded and applied as patches onto an environment. When we're shipping our mobile workspaces, because we're changing the app suite and adding things on, that's sometimes areas that we're having to use the hotfix process, and so that's what you'll see. And I'll give you some examples of where the documents are to get to that. We recommend for partners when you're developing, because you'll more likely be shipping your mobile workspace at the same time as product updates, to include that in your deployable package that you have for your solution, so that they go out together. Developers who are working internally or have the option of using the project packages to move things around between the environments. But when it comes to the shipping process, we recommend the deployable package. With Platform Update 4, we have a new mechanism that's available and that we're recommending for the deployment process. While the product is working, and as you saw Miriam had in the demo, that list off to the one pane of all of the workspaces and what she was manipulating there, that information is stored in some AX tables, and that's not getting data into those tables isn't easy. And what we have done is we've created a process for packaging those up as the XML document that she had shown. What we recommend is that you upload those into a resource in the AOT, so you have all of your information stored within your metadata, alongside any of the forms or other things that you're referencing. And then you create a very simple class. That class extends from a well-known class so that we can use the type system to do discovery. When you do that deployment, we recognize if this class exists, and we will move that XML package out of resource and into the AX table so it's ready to go, and then it's available for you to publish. We don't do the publish step. That's a more explicit part that you do, but getting things into the right process, this is how you go about getting workspaces moved in. And as part of that, we have some implementation guides that we've started creating for each of the mobile workspaces. Each one of them, as we're shipping on that monthly cadence, there's a different hotfix that's necessary. There may be some configuration steps. There may be some setup necessary or security. I'll jump in and I'll show one of the examples of the cost controlling workspace. And this pattern is followed for each one. And one thing, each one of the mobile workspaces is following a very similar pattern of having a document. When we publish them, we have a blog that we're going to start putting announcements out for each one of them in terms of the mobile items that are available. We go through a list of prerequisites. In this particular case, you'll see that there's a hotfix that needs to be pulled in. And then the users can download the mobile app from the store. It'll go through things like what's the functionality that we're providing, what's the data security, what are some of the actions that are available in terms of the functionality exposed by the mobile workspace, screenshots to give you a sense of what's in. And a note about the 5 that are out there right now. They came out before we had the new deployment model and the new UI customizations. The new deployment model is available with Platform Update 4. The new UI is going to be available with the upcoming platform release for the mobile. So we'll be working with these teams to update their versions in the coming months so that you'll end up seeing the new deployment and the new UX. Getting started guide, some different scenarios to run through in terms of viewing the functionality in there. Okay, so we've gone through and given you a lot of a good breadth of the mobile client, both from the experience that you can do as an end user, the experience as a developer to go through and build through the recording, some of the caveats, talking about how you get the deployment in for the administrator. But this is only one mobile solution. There are multiple mobile solutions, and there are decisions you have to make if this is the right one. We think it works for a number of things. It's fast. It heavily leverages the functionality you have built into the system. It can build very rich experiences. It's easy to do the recording and pull in the data as you've seen through these demos. But it doesn't necessarily solve all possible mobile scenarios. And this is more of an eye chart as you get into. So I'll highlight a few things, and then it's something to look at offline. There are 4 different columns here. One is the operations mobile client that we talk about. The Power Apps using with the common data service. There's been a number of sessions that are talking about that as a data repository and our ability to synchronize data into CDS, in and out of AX. You can also build a Power App directly against AX, Power Apps against SQL Azure or Xamarin. Now, some of the differences between our operations mobile, because sometimes you do have to look at the forms to know is it mobile friendly, and sometimes you have to create new forms or you have to do the front end JavaScript to be able to do the rich designs. Because of that, we're targeting this more as a pro developer. You know, we had aspirations that, yeah, could it be a power user to create some of these things, but I think there's too many caveats for that particular experience. But as you look over into Power Apps world, they're designed to be around PowerPoint-like, you know, drag and drop of resources, Excel-like expressions for your functionality. So it's more of an information worker is able to go in and build those types of experiences. Within the offline capabilities, we're fully offline within this area. Power Apps aspires to be there. We're talking, that's a question that came up in one of the other sessions. They are looking at that. It's just a question of when they want to get to it. And Xamarin is more of a custom implementation. You know, Operations Mobile helps you work against the data that you have in operations and the security and business logic that you have on your forms. We're reusing all of those assets. When you go into the Power Apps world through the connectors or through Xamarin, you're really just accessing the system through data services, OData, for example, or through your entities. So a lot of that richer UI metadata and business logic isn't available for those, and so you'll have to build that on top of what you're doing. But some of the benefits you get from Power Apps or Xamarin, Power Apps allows you to pull in other data. The mobile client that we have is focused just on operations data and what's pulled in, but it does a really good job with that. If you need to pull in data from CRM, you need data from a SQL Azure or SharePoint, and you're trying to do a mixed scenario, that's when you're going to want to look at the Power Apps as the different tool to take that on. Where Xamarin goes further is you need to have deeper integration with your device. Or you need more control over your visual experience than the CS that we've provided. Now, with what we have in this next release, we've really closed the gap on the kinds of visual experiences you can build there, but there's probably other things that Xamarin will allow you to do with native capabilities that we don't have in this platform. So I think our offering is very strong in the Operations Mobile in terms of what you can do, but there's a few cases that you may want to consider one of the other options that are available. And this was just summarizing the same information around reusing your assets, quick to get up and running, and having a strong custom UI versus Power Apps having multiple connectors and power user-like development process, and Xamarin giving you more control going beyond the platform that we have right now. So with that, we are at the end of our session, and this was the last one, so I don't have suggested sessions to go to. Most of the other mobile ones have happened earlier in the week. Contact information that's available. The first one is a link to our team alias that we have in the mobile store, where we have to give a support link to contact. That's one way to get a hold of us. Then myself and Miriam, our email address is here. Depunjan was in the earlier session. If anybody has been repeating, have his email address as well. With that, we'll open it up for some questions. If you want to, I'll repeat the question if you want to shout it out. Anything with alerts. There is a feature that we're looking to do where we can do client-side alerts and the badging. Miriam was mentioning that we're looking at that. In terms of alerts on the back-end system flowing down like push notifications, that's something we don't have. I know a lot of people have talked about it, but that's a bigger ticket item.
Can I add to that?
Oh, yes, please.
So one of the things is that we are providing some API, still not there. We're providing some APIs that through business logic, you can essentially do some validation. And in the case that there is some problem, let's say they have to enter a phone number and the format is not matching, then you can throw a message to the user and saying that they have to correct that. Also, when you're doing the task and the task operation goes, when the task actually gets synced up, all the messages that you're seeing in the info log from AX instance, those are the messages that are true in the case you have failure. So if you have failures, those are coming true. The other thing that we're going to do later on as well is that also if you're loading pages and that page is showing some messages, this is an upcoming work that is not yet in place, that we are going to display that to the user as well. So many of those messages that you see in AX should be also channeled through the mobile.
Yep.
A couple of device type questions on my part, though. If you change the context when you go from portrait to landscape, what occurs? And then also, I did see a camera picture. Is also a location available as a base?
We don't, so the GPS was one that we've received a lot of feedback in the last session, so we need to take a look at that one. We do support taking of pictures and barcodes, are two inputs that we have right now. And portrait versus landscape, right now it's just portrait mode, so if you turn it sideways, it doesn't make any adjustment. We haven't put in the work to support, a responsive layout on the phone as you're moving things around like you have in the browser client.
The inputs for the photo and barcode, are those just inferred based on the data type? Because I saw she just took a picture. Did that control just show up because that was a picture data type?
Miriam?
Yeah, the control, you can actually, through the business logic, say this control is going to be barcode. So we actually put the plugin for the barcode. And then it's going to have a little icon that is actually saying this control is a barcode. So it's a little bit different than the picture. It's going to align a line in the middle of the barcode to actually scan the barcode.
Picture is just assumed.
Picture is just assumed as a picture.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering, thinking that on a normal smartphone experience, people are used to seeing access separate icons on their desktop.
Yep.
On their phone. Actually, what you're saying to me, I think, is that you've got one.
We do. It's just one app and it's the suite. So that first dashboard that you come into is a list of applications that are connected to that one product. Yes.
You haven't got any plans to be able to put a shortcut on the desktop with a separate brand?
No, we don't today, and I don't know that the mobile platforms really, like iOS, for example, doesn't allow that type of shortcut. But otherwise, you'd end. So the reason we're doing this is it's all of the metadata is coming from the server, and so we only have to publish one app that's generally available for the product, and we can then pull down all the information. Otherwise, you get into, and then you start having the expense of, and I guess this is a benefit, you don't have to worry about the publish to the store. We take care of that, and you just have to give us the metadata for the app to work against. Trade-off that we've made. Yep.
Pressure sensitive stuff on the new iPhone, it's like when you push it,
Mm-hmm.
it's up the menu. Does that work to bring up all the actions?
We haven't done anything. That's interesting. Okay. Next question.
Sort of with regard to somewhat security, I'm assuming that access to the app is related to the user's security.
It is. Yep.
If the user doesn't have security, would that workspace just not show up on the list?
All of the contents of the workspace does not show up. We have a work item to make the workspace itself not show up right now, so that's something we need to address. But in terms of what you get access to, all of the forms and the lists and all of those things, those are completely secured and taken away. It's just there's a button there that goes nowhere. It's something we need to take care of. No, there is nothing in common. This was built on other technology, specifically working with operations, and we don't have anything from Azure Mobile involved. Next question? Yep.
Basically, one is on the tablet, and you don't use the Windows device.
The Windows Phone is coming shortly. We're in process on that one.
Windows Phone, but we don't want to use a Windows tablet, it wouldn't work. We only want Windows Mobile.
We are not supporting tablet as of now because we do have the web client, right? So for the mobile, we are saying mainly the mobile devices. We're not yet supporting tablet.
Android it works.
It's not that we are saying it doesn't work. It's saying that we might not fit it very nicely for the tablet, but you could launch it.
We're not doing work to support that. We've been focused just on the phone right now. So, yes.
So as a follow-up to this single app, how easy is it to switch this mobile app to multiple different instances?
We didn't show that, but the first time you come in there, there's a prompt for a URL that you end up putting in. And that's the point you have to do. So you sign out from your app, you switch to, in fact, we could probably show that really quick. We didn't show that one in the last one either, but I think it's useful to see. as you get into here. You go into the context menu. We can do the sign out, which is going to get us back to this type of experience. And you can see we have the URL right here that we copied into the system.
Does it say history?
What's that?
Does it say history in the URL?
It doesn't have saved history, so that's a...
I'm an employee and I also need to test the app that I built and I need to record my time. I gotta go out.
You have two of them right now, yeah. Okay, next question.
I noticed the one you show in the recall is you're just adding a workspace inside the app as well itself, right? And now you show that you already published several apps like
Yep.
the operation and the sales order. Is there anything that's stopping me when I open a sales order app and I just add a workspace that's totally unrelated to it? Or is it if I open a sales
well,
order apps, then all the other things that I can configure just related?
right. It's one unit in terms of a mobile workspace, and your app has a series of mobile workspaces. So the developer who's going in to create the cost accounting or a sales order mobile workspace identifies the pages that are involved, the lists, the fields, the actions. All of that's designed into there, and that's published as one unit. So somebody would have to start editing that one item on the system to be able to add in additional items. Maybe I'm missing your question?
Yeah, so when you show the fleet management, right?
Yep.
She goes to the fleet management and the reservation details and whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for example, from the fleet management, like that's the D365, right? That's not mobile management. You just open it in mobile.
The mobile is connecting to a back-end instance, and it's pulled the metadata and the data from a headless form.
So if you saw when I had the mobile sidebar, exactly all the workspaces that are published and showing up there, when you are in the mobile app, they're all showing up there too. So this is exact match.
Mm-hmm.
Does the mobile app take the same security that AX already has?
Yes. It uses the exact same security because we're using the same form that the user would otherwise have. And it also uses the same licensing. So the license that that a user has in terms of the different types, the different forms match into that. The mobile has the exact same licensing model. Do you have a question?
So as soon as we publish a workspace, it comes up on the mobile workspace for the user. So like let's say we have created a workspace for finance, and if the user does not have the finance security role, that will not pop up.
We will get there shortly. The contents of the mobile workspace are security trimmed. You won't get to any lists or details in there if you don't have access, but the entry on that one list still shows up right now, so we need to fix that.
So all the forms that are root navigatable, if you don't have access as a user to that form, you cannot also open that form, the page that is coming from that form in the mobile. But you will see the workspace, you cannot just go. But
Yeah.
we will take care of
So we'll take care of that.
As a follow-up, what's the entry point context then? Because
The mobile workspace is just a visual collection. So it's not a security entry point, but we need to make it go away as a usability. We're not exposing anything with that mobile workspace because we're really securing all of the items below it. We're just showing to the user more than what they should have.
no, but I mean to the form, right? Because they changed the security model in that other respects, entry point context, and it doesn't give you, the most generous permission.
Yes.
So how does the form know entry point context?
When we're fetching to pull down the data, we actually can ask the menu item that from the recording what the security model is. So that's the point we do. And then we don't get, first of all, if you have no access, we don't even bother to do the read. If you have access, we fetch it. But then we'll have to check whether or not you have update access to be able to do actions within there.
Does that mean you have to kind of go into the right menu?
Yep. We track the menu when you do your recording. You had a question?
Is it possible to use the camera of the phone to scan the barcode and create the line using the mobile app?
We have the ability to do the barcode to pull in a value into a field. It doesn't create any records at all. It's about, taking... Yes. Yep. As I was alluding to, but we'll have to document this process. When we ship it from one of the core parts of the product, it's going to be as a resource in there, and you can't edit the items that we're providing in there because it's part of the model that we've shipped. But you can make a copy of that, change the ID, as Miriam had mentioned, give yourself, and it could be the same name, but the ID is the key on that. Make whatever changes you want, publish that one instead of ours. So essentially you have a copy on going after that, so you would have to reapply your customization. Yes? Well, take him, then I'll jump back. Yep.
Are you considering having some kind of extension mode for making modifications like having your product? It would be the same way if you delegate to someone. So you could actually make extensions instead of having to take a copy of the code and then modify it. That would make the least.
We haven't been looking at that, but I think that's relevant. Yeah, we should be talking about that. Question? No, this is probably more of a you've built your own SQL Azure. The solution Power Apps is going against it. It's a custom data source. It could have easily have been CDS or a SharePoint list, a CRM system, any number of things. There's just a number of apps right now that are being built on Azure from the Power App side, or from SQL Azure on the Power App side. As CDS grows in functionality and we add like business logic, we're going to be able to take over those kind of scenarios from the SQL Azure. Today, they have some things that we don't have in CDS, but we're fast working on that. Okay. Can you preview? No, we don't, and that's probably the part of the deploying to a test system to go through and do your test on that, and then take your published product up to production. That would be my recommendation. So we're at time. There's going to be another group, I think, coming in here after us. So we'll step down, and if there's anybody has questions, they want to come up to us. But thank you for taking the time to come and listen.